A word of caution. This episode contains depictions of murder that may be disturbing and triggering to some listeners. Please take care when listening. 40 years ago, an idealistic young woman was staying at her mostly deserted college campus during spring break because she needed to fulfill obligations for the teaching degree she was about to obtain. After graduation, she wanted to return to her small community and educate young minds. Instead, she was brutally murdered in her dorm room not long after she returned to campus after visiting her family for the weekend. This murder took place in Elizabeth City, on the campus of a historically black college and university, and while it has never been solved, there is also almost no digital footprint containing the details of this case. A fellow true crime writer is the one who brought it to our attention, and this episode will feature details he's gleaned from many years of research into this cold case. There is much to love about North and South Carolina, but the two states have also had their fair share of violent and senseless crimes over the years. From murders on the Blue Ridge Parkway, in the heart of big cities or sleepy college towns, and along the coastal waters, some of these stories may be new to you. Some may have happened in your town. Some may involve people that are still missing to this day. But all will leave you remembering to always be vigilant about the people you meet and the places you go. I'm Renee Robertson. Please join me for Missing in the Carolinas. Episode 93. Who Murdered Sharon Jones at Elizabeth City State University? I wanted to start out today's episode by thanking Greg Fox, a true crime writer in Australia who first contacted me last year about this case. Greg currently lives on the Gold Coast in Australia, but he attended Barton College in Wilson, North Carolina during the late 1980s. Greg enjoys delving into little-known cold cases and uncovering new information. He offered to share his research on this case with Missing in the Carolinas because we often cover cold cases, so today's script is brought to you courtesy of him. You can learn more about this case at the Facebook group called Who Murdered Sharon Beatrice Jones? I'll put a link in the show notes for you. Let's get started. Elizabeth City State University, or ECSU, is located in the northeast corner of North Carolina, within Pasquotank County. Founded in 1891, ECSU is acknowledged as a historically black college or university. It aimed to provide opportunities to train teachers of the colored race to teach in common schools in North Carolina. One of the more obscure murders in North Carolina history occurred at ECSU during spring break in 1984. On the night of March 4th, a Sunday evening, while the majority of the student population were away from campus, co-ed Sharon Jones was brutally murdered in her dorm room by an intruder. She was staying on campus during the holiday period to complete her practical teaching requirements for her physical education degree. A senior, Sharon, 21, was from nearby Moyock, North Carolina, a small, unincorporated community just south of the Virginia border. She was known by most to be a committed student who kept to herself. Had the young woman tragically invited a suitor to her room that fateful evening, or was this vicious, opportunistic attack by an unknown offender? Has there ever been a murder at a public institution in the last half a century that has garnered so little media attention? But an even more important question is how and why this murder has faded in the memories of the northeastern North Carolina community over the following decades. The Jones homicide is just one of the many unsolved murders of young women on college campuses in the state, but unfortunately hers is perhaps the case with the lowest public profile. Questions would be later asked about what else was going on at ECSU in the early 80s that already had alarm bells ringing with the university administration. In this episode, we will shine a spotlight on the coldest case in the lead-up to its 40-year anniversary of Sharon's death this year. Here are the case details. On the evening of March 4th, Sharon Jones returned to the campus of ECSU after spending a weekend at her family home in Moyock, approximately 24 miles to the northeast of Elizabeth City. It was the start of spring break at ECSU, and school would not officially recommence for another week. The majority of the student population of 1,500 students were nowhere to be seen, and the campus was eerily deserted. Sharon was back on campus early to prepare for her student physical education teacher requirements at H.L. Trigg and P.W. Moore Junior High Schools, as she was due to graduate in May as an education major. As evidence of her commitment to her local community, Sharon had already been offered a teaching position at Moyock Elementary School upon graduation. After arriving back on campus on this fateful night at approximately 9:30 p.m., Sharon spoke briefly with Assistant Housing Director Herbert Williams and his cousin Adrian Douglas to gain entry into Mitchell Lewis Dormitory, located on the southeastern side of the university. Mitchell Lewis Dormitory was an unremarkable-looking three-story residence hall constructed in 1969 to house female students. Williams would later tell police that Sharon had, upon returning to campus, expressed some level of concern about a light that was showing from a dorm room on the upper level of the residence hall. Williams and Douglas would escort Sharon on their entry to the dormitory and investigate the exact source of light on the second floor. According to Williams, the light in question came from the room of another young woman staying within Mitchell Lewis Dormitory, Angela Denise Jones, age 22. No relation to Sharon Jones, from Oak City, North Carolina. She too was an undergrad at the college and had remained on campus over the holiday period to fulfill her duties as intern security officer. Later, it was offered up to authorities by Dr. Harry Gee, Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, that both Sharon Jones and Angela Jones were to have been relocated to a newer dormitory complex on Monday, where other students were already being accommodated. Unfortunately, this would never eventuate as a tragedy was about to unfold. The following morning, Monday, March 5th, at 8:35 a.m., a dormitory supervisor discovered the nude body of Sharon Jones face down on the tiled floor of room 125. A white cloth belt was tied around her neck and connected to a bedpost. The supervisor had gone to investigate after being concerned by the sighting of a broken window from outside the dormitory. Police speculated that around midnight, an unidentified assailant or assailants entered room 125, located on the first floor of the dormitory, and viciously attacked Sharon Jones. The autopsy report from the Pasquotank County Medical Examiner, Dr. Joe Robertson, would state that Sharon had died from strangulation. Other injuries sustained in the attack included a blunt force trauma over her right eye and bruises behind her left ear. Dr. Robertson reported that evidence of sexual assault was inconclusive. Evidence of some sort of struggle was indicated from within the dorm room, with a window being broken from the inside and a small amount of blood found on the window frame. Broken glass was found on the ground outside the window, directly underneath the first floor room. A blood-stained dumbbell was recovered from the murder scene by detectives, found under one of the beds within the room. In hindsight, the investigation of Sharon's murder looked to be floundering almost immediately. Within the first 36 hours of the discovery of her body, Elizabeth City Chief of Police W.C. Owens had declared that the preliminary findings had indicated to him that neither robbery nor rape was a motive for the killing, so that leaves malice or jealousy. With this rush to judgment on motive, local police and the SBI's investigation immediately locked onto Angela Jones as a potential suspect in the murder, as she was residing on the second floor of Mitchell Lewis Dormitory on the night in question. They also identified an individual named Delantry Terrill T. Trafton, age 31, from Elizabeth City, the then boyfriend of Angela Jones. Also an education student at Elizabeth City, Trafton was said to have been a U.S. Army Special Forces soldier who had served in the Vietnam War. In the 2 weeks prior to the murder, Trafton had come to the attention of campus security concerning inappropriate behavior and harassment toward female students within the Mitchell Lewis Dormitory. He was rumored as being placed on a 14-week suspension by school officials, which barred him from further co-ed dormitory visitations. According to statements Trafton provided to police, he spent the night inside the dorm room of Angela Jones and then departed the dormitory at 7 a.m. the following morning. Trafton and Angela Jones did provide detectives with some interesting information about the night in question. The pair claimed they received a knock on their second-floor dorm room door between 11 and 11:30 p.m. The person, thought to be on the outside of the door, was alleged to have asked, "Can I know your name? What's your name?" Both Trafton and Angela Jones said they did not reply to these questions through the door, and the person moved on. At midnight, Angela Jones left the room to commence her rostered shift as an on-campus trainee security guard. The Elizabeth City Police Department would interview around 40 people in this case, and a half dozen persons of interest submitted to lie detector tests administered by the SBI. Bureau agents conducted tests on blood and hair samples as well as latent fingerprints found at the murder scene, but none of the test results proved to be conclusive in incriminating a suspect. The life of Sharon Jones was celebrated at the Samuel Chapel Holiness Church in Moyock late on the afternoon of Wednesday, March 7, 1984. A crowd of mourners, including ECSU Chancellor Dr. Jimmy R. Jenkins, packed the chapel to pay respects to their fallen sister. Dr. Jenkins, who appeared visibly upset, spoke to the gathering about the unbearable loss. In a subdued voice, he appeared to wonder out loud, "Sometimes it does appear that the good die young." He added that the university family of ECSU had been deeply affected by the tragic circumstances. Sharon was also remembered by Reverend Little Joe Powell as a woman of real faith. He gave passionate dedication to preciousness of life within his moving eulogy. "This was one of the hardest blows I have ever had to take," Reverend Powell said. "It was a sad day when I heard the news. I felt like hollering." The Reverend would further lament the passing of Sharon, but was firm in his Christian belief that her sufferings were now over. The Daily Advance would report that only 6 weeks earlier, Sharon had addressed the same congregation from the pews at Samuel Chapel. One churchgoer recalled that an assured Sharon told those in attendance that when she died, she wanted to go to heaven. Understanding the spiritual significance of her statement, she asked that if there was any sin in her heart, would God forgive her? Sharon's family and friends, including her mother, Mrs. Willie Jones, a local florist, were in attendance and wept openly as they passed the open, flower-draped coffin at the door of the church. Sharon was the daughter of the late Joshua T. Jones Sr., who had been killed in the Vietnam War. She had 4 siblings, including 2 sisters, Sandra and Lisa, as well as 2 brothers, Nicholas and Joshua Jr. Before we continue, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. Are you looking to level up your writing or learn a new skill? Whether you focus on nonfiction or are more inclined to creative writing, or want to learn how to put together a digital portfolio of your work, Wow Women on Writing can help. Interested in podcasting? Check out a digital course I created called You Can Start a Podcast. During this pre-recorded webinar, you will learn the benefits of creating your own podcast, materials you need to get started, how to develop content that will keep listeners coming back for more, and ways your podcast can create supplemental income. I'll share examples of different types of podcasts, how to decide on a format, ways to handle the technology necessary for creating a podcast, how to develop your first few episodes, promotion and monetization ideas, and ways you can repurpose your podcast content. All written materials and resources are provided by me. I'll also give you a handout with information discussed in the webinar, along with suggestions for a few different types of podcasts to explore. Best of all, this webinar only costs $30. You can find it by going to wow-womenonwriting.com and clicking on the Classroom tab. I'll also post a link in the show notes. I have a question for you. Do you use a pre-cleanse oil as part of your daily skincare routine? I didn't until a few years ago when I decided to try out the products by SkinxErin, and I swear it has made a world of difference on the appearance of my skin. The pre-cleanse oil is the best way, in my opinion, to thoroughly melt away excess makeup, sunscreen, environmental pollutants, and residual product buildup from your skin without stripping. I use their pre-cleanse oil every morning and night, followed by my daily cleanser for fresh skin. I combine it with the Hydrating Beauty Oil and the Perfecting Night Oil each day, and I swear my skin looks at least 10 years younger. Go ahead and treat yourself with 10% off your order using my code MissingCarolinas10. I'll include a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. A week after the murder of Sharon Jones during spring break, ECSU Chancellor Dr. Jimmy R. Jenkins addressed a specially gathered student and faculty assembly in the Vaughn Center on campus. Jenkins was a distinguished-looking man and a graduate of the university with a bachelor's degree in biology. He would go on to have a highly successful career in university administration, with future stops as chancellor at Edward Waters College in Florida and Livingstone College in North Carolina. At this time, Jenkins was the first alumnus of ECSU to serve as its chief executive officer. However, on Monday, March 12, 1984, the chancellor was somber and immediately looked to calm the nerves of the student body and reassure parents. He laid out his plans to put the university into a security clampdown by taking extraordinary steps till at least the end of the current spring semester. The chancellor outlined the new safety initiatives coming into immediate effect would include 24-hour supervision within all dormitories, elimination of the co-ed visitation policy, new peepholes to be installed at any dorm room occupied by a female, and the installation of more sophisticated security alarm systems on doors leading into dormitories. Any student involved in breaching the co-ed visitation policy would be suspended immediately by the administration. Further, any non-students found on the university grounds were to be arrested on the spot by campus police. We do not know who did this very, very tragic deed, and we must be on the lookout for anything that looks out of the ordinary. We all must be security officers, Jenkins said. In an odd twist to the direction of his security update, Jenkins broke off into a broader diatribe about recent antisocial behavior and campus violence at the state university. In recent weeks, we have been confronted with various acts of barbarism, gang fights, Jenkins told the gathering. This type of behavior will not be tolerated as it has in the past. I'm prepared that if we need to reduce the size of the enrollment of the university by expelling students, then I'll do that. Jenkins then emphatically stated that some current students at ECSU were not ready to attend a university. How did the chancellor's comments about acts of barbarism tie to the murder of Sharon Jones? And how widespread was the perceived violent behavior or gang fights at the university in 1984? According to Robert R.J. Walker, the editor of the student newspaper The Compass, for the 1983-84 period, ECSU was completely unprepared for this sort of tragedy to occur at the small university. Walker had shared some classes with Sharon Jones and was due to be part of the same graduating class at the end of the spring semester. Coming back onto campus after spring break to find out Sharon had been killed was devastating, Walker said. She was the last person you would think would become the victim of this sort of crime. Sharon was quiet and studious, just the nicest person. The effect on the student body was one of paranoia and finger-pointing as his fellow students tried to determine who had taken the life of Sharon in the most brutal manner. Walker recalls in his role as the editor of The Compass that university officials were keen to control the narrative about the murder and the subsequent investigation by local authorities. He added, the ECSU leadership were under immense pressure to manage the fallout from this tragic event. On top of this, there were ongoing safety concerns that the killer could strike again. By the end of March 1984, Police Chief Owens sounded almost pragmatic about the ability of local law enforcement to charge a suspect with the murder of Sharon Jones. We will actively pursue any leads and witnesses will be re-interviewed, Owens said. He further pledged, this doesn't mean we are out of the ballgame. There's no way we are going to give up on this. And then the investigation went cold. Located on page 10 of the 1983-84 ECSU yearbook, The Viking, is a somewhat cryptic memoriam to the students of the university who fought a battle and conquered their oppressor. It comes from Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, Crossing the Bar. Their reward, eternal life, was granted to them by the master of all forms of life. The verse closes optimistically. Because of this, we are assured our fellow Vikings, who have sailed the seas of life with their banners waving high, are without misery and strife. Peaceful, eternal security is theirs. Strangely enough, there is no specific dedication or obituary to the recent passing of Sharon Jones within this yearbook, which celebrates the past school year. They didn't have to do this to her. Lisa Jones reflected on the murder of her older sibling and the devastation the murder had on their family unit. When you hear Lisa Jones talk, you can discern immediately that you are engaging a thoughtful and sincere person. Her voice is measured but matter-of-fact as she describes Sharon. We were like twins, she said. She was my best friend. To add to the immediate trauma over the death of her sister in March 1984, Lisa Jones endured the most devastating phone call at her home in Moyock on the day of the funeral of her sister Sharon Jones. While at ECSU, Sharon, by coincidence, became good friends with another student named Sharon Jones who attended the university. According to Lisa Jones, she answered the home phone on that Wednesday to hear what sounded like a young man say apologetically, "I'm sorry, I killed the wrong Sharon Jones." Completely overtaken by emotion, Lisa screamed to her mother across the house, "Mama, someone's on the phone saying they killed the wrong Sharon Jones." Devastated and unable to psychologically process the shocking phone call, Lisa Jones kept this information to herself for more than 20 years. By chance, while in downtown Elizabeth City one day in 2005, she decided to visit the police department and discuss the events of the day of the funeral, more specifically, the phone call. The response she received from police was staggering. Lisa Jones says the local police berated her for coming to them after so many years with this new information. "I cried like Sharon was killed all over again," she said. In late 2013, Elizabeth City Police Department issued a public announcement that the Sharon Jones cold case would be re-examined and reinvestigated. It was stated by the department representatives that new improvements in DNA testing may be useful in closing this case. The Jones family was not contacted by the ECPD about the reopening of the case. From what can be surmised, nothing came of the renewed investigation. No further comment on the matter was provided by the ECPD, just silence. Most perplexing in the Sharon Jones case is the almost complete lack of digital footprint regarding the events around the 1984 period and the subsequent investigation by authorities. Even more troubling is the unsolved murder is not listed as a cold case on the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation website. This is a crime that took place at Elizabeth City State University, being a member institution, one of 16 public institutions, of the University of North Carolina system. One wonders the type of media attention a tragedy of this sort would garner at a higher profile state or prestigious private university, as opposed to a historically black college located in an economically disadvantaged region. As an example of possible media bias and disproportion, research the tragic case of UNC sophomore Faith Hedgepeth, which we featured on episode 29 of this podcast. The 19-year-old from Hollister, North Carolina, and member of the Halawa-Saponi tribal community, was beaten to death by an unknown intruder within her apartment complex located close to the Chapel Hill campus in September 2012. There was evidence Hedgepeth had been sexually assaulted, and detectives confirmed semen had been recovered from the victim. Investigators would also state that an empty Bacardi peach rum bottle was used as the murder weapon. This unsolved murder received national and international media attention for close to a decade as police, true crime podcasters, and internet sleuths actively investigated leads in the case. Then, in September 2021, the Chapel Hill Police Department arrested Durham resident Miguel Enrique Salguero Alvarez, 28, for Hedgepeth's murder. The suspect, originally from Guatemala, is believed to have not been known to the victim. He is currently being held in Durham County Detention Center awaiting trial. North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein would outline at the arrest press conference that more than 200 DNA samples were analyzed to rule out potential suspects in the investigation. A DNA sample from the crime scene is believed to have been matched to Salguero Alvarez. As the 40-year anniversary of the Jones murder has now come and gone, the search for answers in this case should be focused on advances in DNA technology and genetic genealogy. These developing technologies have led to numerous arrests in cold cases across the U.S., most notably the April 2018 arrest and subsequent conviction of Joseph James DeAngelo in Sacramento, California, in the Golden State Killer and East Area Rapist crimes. DeAngelo was responsible for a prolific series of home invasions, rapes, and murders which terrorized Californian communities during the 1970s and 1980s. If you have any information regarding the unsolved murder of Sharon Beatrice Jones at Elizabeth City State University, please contact Elizabeth City Police Department at 252-335-4321. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Missing in the Carolinas. Again, a special thanks to Greg Fox for all he is doing to bring awareness to the Sharon Jones cold case here in North Carolina. Her family and community deserves answers after all these years. Please like and share the Who Murdered Sharon Beatrice Jones Facebook page to help spread the word about this unsolved murder. Next week, I'll be discussing a cold case from UNC Asheville that's more than 50 years old. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and give it a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so please like our pages and get started on a discussion of the missing people profiled on the show. Do you know of a missing persons case in North or South Carolina that you think should be covered? Email me at missinginthecarolinas@gmail.com with any details you can share. And don't forget to check out our sponsor, Wow Women on Writing, and the great programs and writing contests they have to support writers at wow-womenonwriting.com. Treat yourself to a skincare kit from SkinxErin with my code MissingCarolinas10. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Macintosh Multimedia. Sound editing is provided by Daniel Robertson. Thanks so much for listening.